here. We out here on this. Y'all, we out here on some nut shit. Y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know what it is.
Wait, time out. I don't have a good song on. I don't even have a song on.
The candle is lit, my cup of water is full, and that means it is time to pod. So, welcome back everyone to the Bittersweet Taste podcast, and more specifically, welcome back to another episode of Topical Thursdays. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about Tyler, the Creator's artistic profession by looking at the difference between his albums from, between 2011 and 2019. I actually got this topic, you guys voted on this topic, or some of you guys voted on this topic on my Twitter last week to be last week's Topical Thursday, but I ended up going with the Art versus Artist one, which came in second, but I already had that one written. So today we are getting the Tyler one. For today, I will only be sticking to his studio releases. So that means I'm not going to be talking about Bastard, which is his mixtape, which came, I believe, in 2007 before Goblin. I won't be talking about that just because I kind of wanted to just kind of hold myself back when I'm talking about Tyler, because there's a good bit to talk about with his albums compared to one another, and I just kind of wanted to be more concise with it. So, also, I'm not too familiar with Bastard as a mixtape, so just kind of want to leave that out because I didn't want to listen to it for the first time today or yesterday and just kind of think of something on the spot for it. Also, I'll be focusing mainly on his music, so I'll be leaving out like his fashion ventures as well as his multimedia ventures, including the TV shows and all the other stuff that he's done. So again, music podcast for now. So just be talking about the music. Maybe if I switch up to fashion at some point, then I'll come back to his Gulf of Floor line, but I'll say that for a different time. For anyone who isn't familiar with Tyler, the Creator, he's made a he's made a very big name for himself in the rap scene as a true artist, in my opinion, being a major part of every aspect of his music, the production, the writing, the performance, the visuals, the promotion, etc. He has his he has his input all over every single piece of music that he makes, which I think is really awesome, and not a lot of artists do something like that. So, I can only think of a few off the top of my head that are very few that are in every specific part of, every single aspect that goes into their music as much as Tyler is. I would consider him to have one of the most interesting catalogs of music in rap and across all genres of music in general. The only other person I could think of that kind of has a similar kind of interesting way that they approach their catalog from the time they start to now would be like Taylor Swift. I would even put Future in there. You could put Kanye in there, but it's kind of inversely kind of the opposite of in terms of quality progression, you could argue. But yeah, and his artistic art to me is insanely incredible, especially if you look at where he is now compared to where he started. So I'm going to start off in 2007 very quickly, just to mention that Tyler at this point was one of the founding members of what they would call an alt-rap collective called Odd Future, which contained a ton of artists, each one having their own styles and talents. And at its peak, which was probably around 2013, I believe, maybe around 2013, 2015, at their peak, it contained a lot of members. Some of the most notable ones being Frank Ocean, Earl Sweatshirt, and then like Domo Genesis. There are a whole bunch of them. I can't name all of them off the top of my head, and I didn't feel like typing them all in because for the most part, none of them have really had the, I guess, cultural impact that Frank Ocean and Tyler, the Creator, had. But, teach his own. Here, at this point, Tyler was already very involved in the creation of all of the collective's joint projects, eventually releasing his own solo mixtape on Christmas 2009 called Bastard. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on this era of Tyler's music on this specific podcast because I feel like a lot of his efforts at this point were put towards Odd Future's group efforts. And while that's obviously very admirable and definitely paid off for him in the end, I don't think it's worth talking about as I'm just talking about his solo projects. So we're skipping ahead to 2011, where in May, Tyler released The Goblin, his debut studio album. At the time of release, Tyler was writing a pretty good amount of hype. The hype was coming from could be up for debate. I would kind of call it underground hype, but it still got a lot of hype regardless. And and he was running a good amount of hype after the release of his Bastard mixtape, which was pretty well received by anyone who heard it at the time, and his single Yonkers, which actually I didn't know, which earned him the Best New Artist award at the 2011 MTV Music Awards. And that alone gave him a crap ton of visibility. I mean, just even being nominated for something like that. I mean, now the MTV Music Awards aren't anything too special, but at this point, early 2010s, late 2000s, when, music award shows had a little bit more credibility than they do now, this was a good amount of visibility for him. And it was great that he released Goblin off of his debut album off of this hype. So going into Goblin, also, before I get into this album, I will say that as I talk about these albums, I'm not going to go super, super, super in-depth with, each song on the album or really in-depth at all into each song on the album, because I would be here for hours and hours and hours, because, all of his albums are so different from one another for the most part. So I could spend so much time talking about the intricate little details of every album, but I'm not going to do that. What I'll do is for each album, I'll just kind of talk about the central themes or just the central style or the sounds that are found in each album, just to kind of paint a picture that of this artistic arc that I'm trying to kind of explain. So again, if you want more explanation onto each one of Tyler's albums individually, I would recommend, well, first of all, listening to them, and B, I just requesting, let me know if you want a specific analysis on or a more in-depth analysis on one specific album. I can easily do that for his later works because I'm more familiar with them, but I'd be happy to do that for any of his other albums. But, just for the sake of this, today's podcast, just going to be talking relatively surface level for all of his albums. So let's get into it. Starting with, again, his debut album in 2011 called Goblin. I think it's worth noting that I only became a fan of Tyler's after the release of his third album, which was Cherry Bomb in 2015. And I say after the release of his third album I should be more specific, because I didn't actually really like Cherry Bomb that much when it first came out. In fact, I gave it a few listens to try it out, and I didn't actually really connect with it that much at all. So I kind of left it behind. I don't even think I have in my music catalog any songs, or before I did this analysis, let me say, I don't think I had any songs saved from any of his albums other than Goblin. I only have 2 songs saved from Goblin. From Goblin to Goblin, Wolf, and then Cherry Bomb. I only had 2 songs saved from all 3 of those albums before re-listening to them now for this analysis. And those 2 songs I'll talk about later. But, it's worth, I want to say this because I'll kind of be analyzing his first 3 albums with a little bit of hindsight. In other words, I've experienced the bulk of his material somewhat recently after listening to Flower Boy and Igor. Flower Boy was the first album that I listened to very in depth, so not nearly as much as first 3 albums. So kind of this is me analyzing these albums almost with fresh ears in 2020. You know what I mean? It might have had a different opinion if I heard them when I released back then, but for now, this is my current analysis and opinions on them. So yeah. So my opinion might be slightly skewed just because, again, I listened to Flower Boy and Igor realistically before I listened to his first 3 albums, if you want to think of it like that, which if you are familiar with his albums, they're completely different in every aspect. So again, I will favor the sounds of Flower Boy and Igor more, but I'll get into that. But yeah, looking back at this album, it was really, really, really interesting, as it is, again, drastically different from his more recent projects. I was familiar with his earlier albums, but I never really took the time to listen to them, in depth. But it is craziness how different, especially now with Igor coming out only last year. It's insane the difference between Goblin and Igor sonically, and just in every aspect for the most part. Off rip, this album is so damn dark. Insanely dark in the style of it, in the sounds of it, in the lyrics. even like the prettiest, even like the pretty chords that Tyler loves to use are very rare, and even if they're on here, they're just hidden behind just layers and layers and layers of eerie synths and hard drums, and just like this really dark, grimy, gross sound. Almost like horror in its essence, if you will. And this album is just downright aggressive. I like, as I'm listening to this album, it's a hard, to me personally, it's very hard to listen to this album in one go, just because it's so long. I think it's like 100. I think it's like an hour and 15 minutes long, something like that. The deluxe version I'm referring to. Yeah, it's 18 songs. Oh yeah, so it's 18 songs long and 22 minutes, 18 songs long, 1 hour and 22 minutes in duration. It's long, and it's not even like, again, there are only 18 songs in there. Some of the songs are just long as hell too. I mean, the intro Goblin is damn near 7 minutes. The third song, Radicals, is 7 minutes. Like, some of the songs here are long listens, and if you're not a big fan of the sound, it's a very difficult listen to go through in one go. But, I did it for the sake of the analysis, so I did. And as I was listening to it, I just got the feeling that homie was just like, I don't know, rapping at me like I forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer. like he's my mom yelling at me because I forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer for the third time this week or something like that. It's insanely aggressive. He's rapping at me or at the listener like he wants to hurt you. Or like he wants to hurt someone, and that you should be scared even though he might not be talking about you specifically. He also doesn't shy away from being controversial on this album at all. I mean, it's 2011. It's not like it was only 9 years ago, but like, woo, he does not. I mean, some of you guys might already know the lore of Tyler, the Creator, but I mean, this album has some crazy shit on it, like talking about killing celebrities, using homophobic slurs, which is a big thing for him to do, raping women, etc. There's some crazy shit on here. It is worth noting that if you're not in the know of Tyler, the Creator lore, it's worth noting that these controversial topics would actually get Tyler banned from the UK in 2015 because the Prime Minister, or the head of the, I guess, whatever department is in charge of banning people, I guess, or has the power to ban individuals, they didn't think that his music, I guess, replicated the values of the UK, so he was just straight up banned for like I think the ban, when he did an interview, I think he said that the ban was for like 3 to 5 years. He did end up getting unbanned, but that was after he drastically changed the kind of music he was making. But again, we'll get into that. While some of the things he said then are obviously in bad taste, and now listening to it in 2020, they were in pretty bad taste then. And even with that, I can see that their use really as shock value really paid off in terms of his visibility, and ultimately it didn't really hurt him that much in the end or in the long term at all. I mean, obviously he definitely kind of shook some people the wrong way. Me to an degree, me too, especially in the sound, kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Shook me the wrong way, God. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I was kind of not scared to listen to his music ever again, but it was kind of like, well, it's very, on the other side of the spectrum from the music I like to listen to. Because at that time, I was listening to whatever, pop music or something or another that is definitely not this. But again, in he's done interviews, especially after this album, I think around like 2013, 2015, even 2017, I think, around when Flower Boy came out. He was doing interviews and where people were asking him about like why he wanted to use like all this controversial stuff in his music, and he even admitted that it was all for shock value. Which, I mean, it's one thing to. It's kind of tricky because it's like, all right, if he's articulating that he doesn't actually want to go ahead and do these things or think these things about these people, then I guess it's not that bad. I mean, like, it worked. Like, I don't even know how to, you can say what you will, but it definitely worked. He got like such an insanely dedicated fan base based off of this music alone. And, in a way that carried him through the very start of his career. Obviously, Igor and Flower Boy and even Cherry Bomb to an extent are way more mainstream in terms of sound. But before he was hitting that mainstream sound, his core fan base definitely kept him going, which is awesome. So, he said some bad shit, but most of it was kind of funny. So I'll let it slide. I mean, yeah. That being said, the writing throughout this album is great. Absolutely great. Clever bars, good rhyme schemes, gripping delivery. It's a really good album. I mean, in me listening to it now and having, in my opinion, a greater appreciation for music and what makes music good, I think it's a pretty damn good album. All things considered. There are also, and a lot of this the hindsight or me listening or me liking the sounds of Flower Boy and Igor more, I think that even helped me like this album more and listening to it now, because there are some hints of the beautiful sounds and the melodies that would dominate his more recent work, which I liked hearing a lot in these music. I mean, you can hear, it's cool to I'm kind of, well, not me personally, but people like me who listen to Tyler's latest works, quote unquote, before his older works, are kind of in a unique position where they get to see the end, they get to see the finish line, kind of before they see the start gun, and they don't, it's cool. I can definitely hear parts of Flower Boy in Goblin, which I love hearing. On a more personal note, the two songs that I've had saved on my phone for super long, and I actually kind of forgot about for a time, are Yonkers and She. And they are two of my favorite songs ever for two very different reasons. Yonkers is a perfect example of how interesting and fun rap could be, and be to perform and be to write, and also just how fun it can be to listen to. And just, it's entertainment. At the end of the day, it's entertainment. And this is the definition of an entertaining song. And also, the genre of rap or hip-hop, whatever you want to categorize this as, it doesn't always have to take itself so seriously. I mean, this song is insanely simple, has a cynical instrumental, hilarious tongue-in-cheek punchlines, fantastic wordplay, and of course the controversial lyrics are there. It's great. It's it's everything you could want in an edgy rap song. It's everything you could ever want. And I love it for that. She, on the other hand, has a wonderful, I like for a completely different reason. It's way prettier of a song, way more tame of a song, which is why I saved She immediately on the first time I listened to this album, and then I didn't get back to Yonkers until years later. But, I mean, She was way more of a tame song, so it was a lot better, it was a lot easier for me to get into it. But, the song features this wonderful back and forth between Tyler's dark voice, rapping about stalking this girl, and Frank Ocean, on the other hand, beautifully singing about, he's also singing about stalking this girl, but he says it in a way less menacing tone, so it sounds sweeter in a way, I guess. But the instrumental on She is also one of my favorite instrumentals in music, period, and it's not even, and the funny thing is, it's not even super complicated or hard-hitting like a lot of the instrumentals are now, especially in his own more recent work. But I just love how every individual part of the song or of the instrumental works so well with the other parts of the instrumental, and how both Tyler and Frank's deliveries are very heavily pronounced by it. I think it's there are other really good examples of how, refined Tyler's production is or will be on this album. Tron Cat is a good example of that. Transylvania a little bit, and then Radicals. I think it's Radicals is the one I'm remembering, and then I don't know. There are a bunch. I didn't want to do a song by song on this. I just kind of wanted to bring up the highlights, but there are parts in this album where I can his prowess as a producer are shining through, and I think She is a good example of that. So leaving Goblin and moving on to 2013 with the album Wolf. In a lot of ways, Wolf strikes me as a more refined version of Goblin, and it's also a very obvious, oh my gosh, there it is, a very obvious step towards his current sound. And it's not the biggest step, but again, I think it's the biggest step is definitely between Cherry Bomb and Flower Boy, but I think this is the most obvious step where he's really kind of starting, especially again in hindsight, I can definitely see the stepping stone. I can definitely see the journey started from Goblin to Wolf to eventually Igor, but it's definitely there. Wolf maintains a lot of the elements that made Goblin so popular, or at least the elements I think made Goblin so popular, while improving on a lot of things. The instrumentals keep their heavy synths and sharp beats, but they definitely sound cleaner, like a lot cleaner, and way more deliberate. They're not just, not that Goblin was rough, really, but anytime it was rough, it was kind of done so on purpose. But it's not this, a similar song on Wolf just sounds way more refined, honestly. The controversial lyrics and content is still kind of sprinkled throughout the album, but way more sparingly. This album is still kind of dark, but it's not nearly as dark as Goblin is, and it's because Goblin's is pitch black. If you want to put it on a scale, Goblin's pitch black. This one's like a nice deep gray, or like a nice light asphalt, if you if you will. Songs are way more melodic, and what I call the pretty parts, the prettier parts of the instrumentals are way more prominent. For example, on songs like Wolf, Answer, and Tree Home 95. And again, relating back to Goblin, where the quote-unquote pretty parts of the instrumentals are really just bogged down under just, like I said, layers of this dark, eerie sound. On here, he lets them play out more. And again, in hindsight, you can, eventually, and I'll talk about this more as we go on, but those pretty instrumentals will eventually become the predominant sound in his music. So, step forward, this is a nice thing to hear to me. The what I would call quote-unquote joke songs, or songs that aren't meant to be taken seriously, but are more, I guess you can call them entertainment songs, if you will, where, it's just like the punchlines are jokes, like things like that. Like, it's meant to be more fun and not even lighthearted, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. Those joke songs are still here in the form of songs like Colossus, Pigs, and Tamale. By the way, Tamale is amazing. Tamale is a fantastic song. It sounds like super fun. The sample or the loop that he used, and it makes such a weird environment for the song to exist in, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful in a different way. But compared to Goblin, these joke songs are somewhat less offensive for the most part. And on this album, his rapping is a good bit cleaner too. Songs like Jamba, Domo 23, Pigs, Parking Lot, and Rusty, to me, are all really great displays of his stellar rapping ability. And again, that's one of the things, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this analysis on him, is because he's so multifaceted as an artist that you can really look at so many different parts of his music and analyze them and like talk about them and compare them, and it's fun, and in rapping as well. He's an insanely good rapper, he's an insanely good producer, he's an insanely good just artist in general. And while the rapping on Goblin was not bad whatsoever, in fact it was very good, I just again think it was way more refined on this album. The posse cut Trash Wang also does a good job of showing off some of the members of Odd Future, which is nice. Outside of Odd Future, there were some big names on this Outside of Odd Future, there were some pretty big name artists featured on this album as well, which is cool to see, especially, the two out of Odd Future features were Pharrell and Erykah Badu, both of which are massive names for in their own right. But, for a sophomore album to kind of get these features, and especially coming off an album so controversial as Goblin and so dark as Goblin, it says a lot about the quality of the music, and it says a lot about how other artists view the music, because an artist, I would like to believe that any artist, especially an artist with the pedigree of Pharrell and Erykah Badu, would not jump on a song, would not support a work of music that is not of high quality. You know what I mean? And it's actually very funny that these two are his first, his first features that are not part of Odd Future, because Pharrell is one of the best producers of all time. So it only makes sense that if Tyler is going to keep focusing on production and his skills in production, it only makes sense to have Pharrell be around him in some way, you know. So it's cool to have him on a song. And in terms of Erykah Badu, one of the greatest singers ever. Again, it shows like he wants at some point to get more into the melodies, which Wolf has a good bit more of the melodies compared to Goblin. So it's nice that, you know, you get Erykah Badu in there to like show off, you know, they're like his guinea pigs to see how his ambitions in these specific facets of music could actually support him, and how he can improve on them with later projects. So that was also very interesting to see those specific two artists. I also want to focus on the fact that Tyler produced the entirety of this album, which is important considering of how heavy of a focus he puts on instrumentals moving forward. You know, being able to executive produce your own rap album or your own album in general is commendable at the absolute least. I mean, you know, it's like I'll compare it to Apple, if you guys will, you know, let me talk about Apple very quickly here. But it's kind of like Apple, where Apple gets, you know, their products to me are you know, have such high quality, and in a lot of ways are the flagship products in their line or in their category. It's because they make everything in-house. Every single part of their product is made by Apple. You know what I mean? So it ends up being so much better. It ends up being so much more seamless. Ends up being more, you know, technically advanced. And in the same way, Tyler being able to having such huge talents as a producer and being able to executive produce his own album, and also being able to do insanely well at other parts of it, you know, rapping, writing. It's great. It lends to a better project overall. And moving forward from there, all of his projects, he has the majority, if not all of the, he has the majority of the production credits on all the songs. I think, you know, I didn't do the math on it, but I would venture to say, from what I've seen, maybe like 80 to 85 to 90% of all the songs that he's put on his albums he's produced in some way or another, which is, you know, awesome. Absolutely awesome. Yeah, and that's Wolf. So moving on from Wolf and into 2015, we get Cherry Bomb. So Cherry Bomb, as far as I know, is probably the most hated. It's the most hated Tyler the Creator album in his catalog. And if you listen to it, you know why. It's a mess. It's a huge mess. This album, to me, can be considered to be the bridge between quote-unquote old Tyler and quote-unquote new Tyler, as it's primarily, at least the way I listen to it, Tyler experimenting with sounds that he wanted to flesh out more. I mean, off rip, we got Death Camp, which is dominated by a loud, insanely overmixed electric guitar instrumental, dominated to the point where it just completely overpowers Tyler throughout the whole song. And honestly, this production-heavy trend is everywhere on this album. We're just like, all the production is just so... One of the biggest complaints on this album is that it was poorly mixed. And yeah, I would agree with that. It's like all the instrumentals just completely overpower, you know, the vocals in basically every song on here. And again, like, this trend is everywhere on this album, with both the instrumentals and the effects that he puts on his own voice. Pilot, for example, reminds me of like the highly distorted sound that you'd find on, like, for example, Kanye's On Sight. Although the very beautiful Sidney Bennett, just put some French sauce on that. Sidney Bennett feature at the end of the song reminds me way more of what would be found in Flower Boy, which again I'll get to. Speaking of Kanye, his verse on the song Smuckers is fantastic. And honestly, it makes me miss, you know, Ye. It makes me miss the time when Ye actually cared about his rapping. It makes me miss that a lot. It's funny because the first time I heard this song, I didn't like it at all. The song Smuckers, and I mean, like, that was the first one I went to because obviously Kanye was the feature, and I was still, Kanye, big Kanye guy over here. So yeah, the first time I went and listened to it, I just didn't like it at all. And now I'm listening to it again with a better understanding. I was like, yo, this shit is hard. This shit's super good. It's one of the better songs on here, in full, honestly. But yeah. Wayne's verse on here, it's because it's Kanye and Wayne on this song. Wayne's verse is also pretty damn good, despite being pretty short, and just kind of like, yeah, despite being pretty short. But other than that, the song is all over the place sonically. Like, that might have been the main reason why I didn't like it. It didn't follow, like, a very familiar song structure to me. It's very, I guess, choppy in the way that it's organized, but, that's just the sound of the album, so I gotta roll with it now. Excuse me. Ooh. Again, that goes through the whole album as a whole. The songs are either, it's so weird to listen to this album, or it's so weird the way that this album is organized. And again, it lends to the reason why I call this album a bridge. It's because most of the songs, you either get these beautifully produced melodic pieces of art, like Find Your Wings and Two Seater, or these incredibly overproduced, purposely messy statement pieces like Run and Cherry Bomb. Cherry Bomb is a goddamn mess, by the way. Oh my god. If you don't like Yeezus, you will not like this song whatsoever. I'm even just kind of like iffy on it. That's at this point. And in some situations, a song is split into both of these sounds, which are almost fighting for the spotlight, like Blow My Load and Pilot. Which, I mean, isn't the worst thing in the world, and he's not the first person to do something like this, but just the way that they sound anyway, it just makes some songs sound like a mess, and sound like he wasn't set on what he wanted these songs to sound like. So, I mean, sometimes it's cool. Like I said, Pilot is kind of cool. Blow My Load's kind of cool. Some of the other examples aren't, which is why I didn't really want to name them out loud, but, songs like The Brown Stains of Darkies, Latifah Part 6 through 12, the remix, also that song title is way too damn long. They're almost like bipolar in a way, switching between what could be a fucking banger of a hip-hop song, which is how it starts, and like this schizophrenic electronic mess, which is kind of what it leads into in parts. Personally, I think that this album gets a lot of hate for the way it sounds, which I can understand to a degree. I can pretty easily see why a lot of people don't like when that people don't like when sounds or songs sound messy, purposely or not. But I mean, Yeezus is my favorite album ever. So I kind of like that sound. So I kind of think that it's overhated for like the weird mixing and the weird instrumental choices and the weird structure and all that. But again, I only like that when it's done right, which I think this album does right and well for the most part. There are obviously examples where it falters using that kind of song structure, but that's why it's not my favorite Tyler project. And again, I saw people complaining about how shitty the mix is at times, which is 100% fair. Although, again, if I'm going to keep calling this the bridge between his old music and his new music, it makes more sense that he put a lot more emphasis on the instrumentals, since they would eventually prove to be probably the most critical part of his songs moving forward, especially in his latest album. And don't get it twisted, there are some great songs in here, but after experiencing the music that this album would eventually lead to, this album absolutely just pales in comparison. Also, before I leave this album, I do also want to mention, going back to the instrumentals and the heavy emphasis on them, he did actually release an instrumental version of the album. So there's the normal version, and then there's the part, and then he also released the album that is just the instrumentals for all the songs. So, again, it lends to the narrative that he's really focused on, X and Y, and one of those is the production. Alright. Leaving Cherry Bomb, we get into Flower Boy, which is easily my favorite Tyler, the Creator project. I remember coming off the sonic mess that was Cherry Bomb, and I'm talking about way back when, Flower Boy was first released. I remember seeing it pop up on iTunes, or I think maybe it was Apple Music at that point already. I guess it was popping up on Apple Music and being like, oh, it's a new Tyler the Creator project. Let me check it out. Keeping in mind that the last time I heard Tyler the Creator really in album format was Cherry Bomb, so my expectations weren't super high, and my idea of what it would sound like was kind of in the air. But I immediately knew that I was in for a completely different Tyler album almost as soon as the album started. As you can guess from the title, which was actually, if you didn't know, originally called Scumfuck Flower Boy. When he was doing promo, he called it Scumfuck Flower Boy. But when it was officially released, it just went by Flower Boy for really obvious reasons. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to be an album that's called Scumfuck Flower Boy is not necessarily going to sell pop off the shelf for the vast majority of listeners, but whatever. But using the official title Flower Boy, this album sounds pretty as hell. So pretty accurate in title. Even the intro song called Forward, Tyler's coarse rapping voice is over this quaint beat bop. I call it beat bop because that's just beep bop beep. That's just kind of I just call it beat. I don't know what else to call it, but that's just the phrase that popped in my head when I hear it. That's just the instrumental that he raps over. And it's also assisted with some light driving synths in it. If Cherry Bomb was the taste test for the melodies, like if it was just like the sample for the melodies, this album is the full first chorus. They're everywhere. Melodies are damn near everywhere. Even the majority of the features are melodic, excluding obviously the A$AP Rocky and the Lil Wayne features. But even the Lil Wayne feature is pretty slow, and it's delivered over an instrumental that's filled with nothing but flighty piano keys, like quiet horns and the occasional synth run here and there. And that's just kind of how this album goes in general. Even with Tyler's deep, harsh voice, which again, if you are not familiar with Tyler's music, his voice is deep as hell. And it sounds kind of scary at times, which, can work for or against the music that you're trying to make, but I think he does a pretty good job with it regardless. But yeah, even with Tyler's deep, harsh voice, the smooth instrumentals on the songs help create this like really cool juxtaposition that really lends to the quality of the album. Because you hear this pretty ass beat come on, this pretty ass instrumental come on, and then it's just Tyler and his deep, his deeper balls to the floor octave voice, rapping at you. It just sounds cool. It's kind of like expectation subversion in a way, but it just lends to a way more interesting listening experience to me personally. Pothole featuring Jaden Smith is a great example of this. To me, it makes it really easy and calming to kind of listen to this album in its entirety. As the style of the album doesn't really change too much like it does on Cherry Bomb, for example, which is again a fucking mess of a full album. That being said, Tyler here is, even with like this very calm, pretty melodic style that's found throughout the whole album, Tyler's still spitting here and there. Like he's still rapping here and there. Who That Boy featuring A$AP Rocky starts off with this soft, like creeping synth, and eventually turns into this like bass heavy banger where, both he and Rocky just go. They're almost trading bars at one point. It's fantastic. I believe that song was released as a single. I might be wrong on that. I think it was that, and then 9/11, Mr. Lonely. But, it's those two songs back to back as singles are, craziness. Speaking of Tyler rapping over some bass heavy synths, I Ain't Got Time features one of my favorite verses on the whole album, which is the second verse, where he just absolutely just pops off, snaps, whatever you want to, whatever lingo you guys want to use, he goes in on this song, which is cool because it's like, no matter where his music ends up going, he will still give his old fans, he'll throw them a bone. He'll be like, yo, I know y'all like me rapping, so let me just bust your head open with these bars real quick. Every once in a while. He does it very rarely at this point, but it's still there. And it's there well. Done well. On the other hand, all of my favorite songs on the album are the ones that, follow the central melodic sound that I talked about. Songs like Where This Flower Blooms, See You Again, featuring Caliucci's, my queen. Caliucci's was also on too. Before I don't want to leave Caliucci's yet. On Cherry Bomb, she was on there twice, which I completely forgot about. And again, I kind of I almost missed that. I was just like looking at the track list thing while I was listening to it a few days ago, and I was like, holy shit, that's Caliucci's on here. I could barely fucking hear her because she's just drowned in just these random ass sounds, man. But, Caliucci's amazing. Tyler, the creator, put me on the Caliucci's, and will be forever in debt for him doing that. But yeah, 9/11, Mr. Lonely, and November are also spectacular songs that, in my opinion, play to Tyler's strengths as a producer, a writer, and a rapper. They're all very well-made songs. They all have different sounds to them while still sticking to the two similar styles. They're all great. Most of the songs on this album are great. It's worth noting that this album has completely gotten rid of the offensive tone that was sprinkled all over his earlier works. To me, this could be attributed to two things. The social landscape, or the first one being the social landscape that he was operating in at this time, and by that I mean like the PC culture that was kind of creeping up and, getting a lot of, I guess, attention in 2017. So like, he definitely, you're not gonna get away with using the F word and the F word I mean the homophobic slur, F word. You're not gonna get away with. I'm not gonna say that word. You're not really gonna get away with that in 2017. And he noticed that. I have to believe that he noticed that. So I think that attributes to it, as well as he no longer thought that he needed the quote unquote shock value that he used for Wolf and Goblin to garner more attention. Because at this point, he's already known. Like he's a big name now. He's in the rap world. He's a household name to an extent. So he doesn't need the shock value to get more people. He just needs to make good music. And to me, Flower Boy is great music. This album isn't immaculate, but I think that this is the sound that I think Tyler really dominates and could continue to dominate. I'll talk about it as I reach the end, after I talk about Igor. But I really don't know where he's gonna go with his sound. I would be happy with him going back to the sound of this album after Igor or on this next release. But he's an evolving artist and he's only seems to be getting better. So, this sound I think is great. This like more melodic, this more melodic sound from Tyler. This very heavy this very heavy focus on production and music production as a whole, including mixing. I think that he is very good at that. He's very talented at it. And it definitely, and I think other people notice that too, considering this got him, I think his first Grammy nomination, I believe, got his first Grammy nomination for Rap Album of the Year. I forgot who it lost to. It lost to it lost to someone pretty good, I remember. Wait, hold on. I don't want to, whenever I mention Grammys, I just want to make sure I'm not talking out my ass, because I always kind of forget that sometimes the Grammys suck. But I just want to make sure I'm not just talking out my ass when I talk about if he got snubbed or not at the Grammys. But yeah, this 2017. It was I guess it was the 2018 Grammys that he was nominated for, but whatever. I'm not gonna bother with it. He lost to something. I don't know if he lost to something good at that point, but whatever. It is what it is. Oof. Okay, so moving off of Flower Boy and into Igor, which is his most recent release, came out in 2019. This, if Flower Boy was the first chorus of melodies, this right here is the main chorus. Actually, the synths might be the main chorus. Let's just say that it's like at Olive Garden when they do that promo where you get to buy an entree and you get to take a separate entree home. It's like that. Oh yeah, by the way, he lost the Damn that year at the Grammys, which, I mean, you know, he was up against some killers there. But anyway, back to this. This album is like, again, that Olive Garden deal, because, you know, it's hard to pick where he put the focus on for Igor, or it's where he put his main focus on, because it's very equally on his, you know, his advancement as a melodic, you know, I'll say rapper, as a melodic artist, as a melodic writer, and then also has a very heavy focus on the goddamn synths, because the synths are fucking anywhere. This album is just pure synth porn. Really, if you like synths, you're gonna love this album, because they are everywhere and they are used perfectly. This is easily Tyler's most personal album, as the entire project is formatted to depict his experience with falling in love with someone. At this point, I mean, if you're gonna give into Tyler lore, this love interest is a man in this scenario, which again is not a topic that is talked about nearly enough in the rap world, and, you know, it should be talked about when appropriate, obviously, but you know, that also plays into the lore, the story of the album, so it's worth mentioning. Following this central theme, most songs are very innocent and soft, not necessarily deep in content, but very heavy in feeling, or definitely heavy in emotion, which, you know, you kind of, if you're going to make a great song, in my opinion, you kind of have to pick one or two, or you have to be really good at both of them being, having, you know, incredible writing or incredible environment or instrumental. Like, to me, a great song, a perfect song has both of them being great. A great song has one of them being really good, and one of them being acceptable, obviously. But, you know, a lot of the songs aren't insanely deep in terms of the lyrics, or complex in terms of the lyrics, but the instrumentals just, you know, they just get you to that place. It's fantastic. And for the most part, these songs are pretty heavily carried by the instrumentals, which, like I said, honestly isn't a bad thing, because the instrumentals are damn near immaculate on this album. Like, I would venture that he spent 80% of the time, 80 to 90, I'm using the same 80 to 90. I would venture to say probably 90% of the time he spent just tinkering with the actual instrumentals. I would even venture to say probably 95% of the time he spent on this album just tinkering with the instrumentals. They're that well produced and that well placed. Again, this album is the definition of synth porn, but they're not just there to be. It's not just synth just because synths sound cool if you do them right. They're not just there for the sake of it. They actually serve a purpose in each and every song. Each instrumental is so insanely well made to give the listener a mood or a feeling in order to have them truly understand the emotion that Tyler was trying to kind of replicate through the individual song. On Earthquake, and I Think, for example, the synths are light and soaring, almost flighty at times, to demonstrate the feeling of initially falling in love with a new person. You know, like when you first fall in love with that special someone, your heart gets all fluttery, you feel happy, you feel like you feel lighter, and that's the tone that he used in the synths and the instrumentals. As I continue to talk about this album, I'm going to keep saying synths, I really mean the synths and the rest of the instrumental. But, you know, the synths are the predominant sound in instrumental, so that's what I mean. So every time I say synth, just assume that I'm referring to the entire instrumental. Going back to it. Like, it's, again, I picked these two songs, Earthquake and I Think, because they're very good examples of, you know, like, the synths are just dancing. It's what it sounds like. It's so perfectly encapsulates. Jesus Christ, I can't talk. Encompasses. That's a better word. It so greatly encompasses the feeling of falling in love that it makes the songs damn near perfect, honestly, and just fits into the whole narrative itself. New Magic Wand, on the other hand, has a more deeper, more aggressive synth. Again, synth and instrumental, and a higher tempo, which, you know, and it makes sense in terms of the song, because at this point in the quote-unquote relationship, he's essentially hating on the girl that his love interest is currently with, talking about, if she got into a car crash, they could finally be together, just some messed up shit. So I guess the dark content isn't gone completely, but it's there somewhere. In the song What's Good, which is, I think I'm pretty sure it's my favorite song off here. I say pretty sure because, I'm between a few of them, but I'm pretty sure this is my favorite song off here. Again, it's called What's Good. There's some friction, in terms of the story of the album. There's some friction in the relationship, and the synths, again, along with the rest of the instrumental, reflect this by being very deep, very frantic, and just, hitting with the force of a bass drum right next to your ear. Like this song is in your face, and which is why I like it so much. In a similar way to New Magic Wand, but definitely a lot heavier and a lot more, like I said, frantic. And it even gets more frantic and aggressive in the second half of the song. As a project, it's really hard to even call this a hip-hop album because Tyler only raps on like 2.5 of the 12 songs. I say 2.5 because one of the songs is split half and half, and one of them is more melodic, and the other one is more rapping. But 2.5 out of 12 songs are rap songs. Again, the other songs are mainly him singing. It's it was this album won in 2019, I guess 2019 or 2020. It won the Grammy for Best Urban Contemporary Album, if I'm correct on the naming of that. Which Tyler had, if you're actually interested in how Tyler feels about the Grammys, which he feels very strongly about them, not necessarily in the most positive light, but go look up his interview about him winning his Grammy. I think it's a really cool interview, and it definitely says a lot about how the Grammys operate if you're more into that. I might talk about the Grammys at some point, but definitely go check that out. But anyway, back to the album itself. While I do think that this is objectively his best work, based on it being his most concise, his most well-produced, his most interesting, and his most emotionally potent album in his catalog, to me, some of the songs kind of lost some of their appeal to me somewhat quickly. I mean, it's only been a year since it came out, but in that time, some of the songs, not a lot of them, and they're also good to me, but some of them just kind of lost their appeal. Not like completely unlike Flyboy, where most if not all the songs still hold their appeal to me. That being said, though, songs like Igor's Theme, Earthquake, Running Out of Time, New Magic Wand, A Boy's a Gun, What's Good, and Are We Still Friends still hold their own to me after a year. And so those are some of those songs are some of the best songs I've ever heard. Are We Still Friends is amazing. Igor's Theme, which is a perfect intro to me. He doesn't even like sing on it. He doesn't even sing. I forget who has the vocals on there. I think is it Lil Uzi? I'm not gonna look it up. But I think that's a perfect intro. It's just synth. It's just synth porn. That's all that intro is, and it's amazing. But some of them, I think, the songs that I just noted there, I think are objectively great songs, and they've held their own. They've been timeless to me since then. It's also, I also kind of want to note that a couple episodes ago I talked about Astroworld by Travis Scott, and I mentioned that I love the idea of hiding features. I love the idea of not having features in the track listing. I think it's perfect because it surprises you every single time, and that's exactly what he did on this album. It's funny because a lot of the features are and a lot of the features and his voice too as well are heavily pitched differently. Like they're heavily pitched high, pitched low. I didn't even hear, as I was listening to it the night that I was listening to it, I didn't even hear the Kanye West feature because it's pitched so his voice is pitched so oddly, and this is the guy that I listen to damn near every day. I should be able to hear his voice. But again, it was cool to hear just like a different artist pop on there. I mean, like the other notable one was, Callie Uchis is on here somewhere. I can't remember where she was, but the Playboi Carti feature was fun to hear. Playboi Carti, when his baby voice was still nice to listen to, but I think again, this is a good example of how hiding features in an album can work towards the quality of the album if it's done well. But yeah, my favorite part of doing this analysis was this analysis of Tyler's albums was definitely hearing the little hints of production of in Tyler's earlier catalog. That was almost always the music that he wanted to make. Like, you can hear it. Again, this is all, I'm kind of listening to this in the ears of hindsight, where it's like, I'm now assuming that Igor is the music that he always wanted to make, and you can hear subtle hints of that in his works as early as Goblin. And I'm sure if I went back and listened to Bastard more critically, I can even hear him back then too. They're still there. The melodies are there every once in a while. The instrumentals are there once in a while. The tone is there every once in a while. But eventually it just got to this point. To me, Tyler's catalog has shown the most amount of artistic growth out of any artist I've listened to. In a way, I look forward to his new music releases like I do to Kanye's, where I don't really know how it's going to sound until I listen to it. And that's kind of where that's where the comparison stops in that aspect. That being said, I think that he's going to stay I think and I hope that he's going to continue to make music like this in the future, since again, I don't think, and by like this, I mean like Igor in the future, because again, I think this was the sound that he was trying to achieve since his start in the music industry. You can even hear it, like I said, all the way back into Goblin. And, I'm sure winning his first Grammy off of this sound doesn't hurt either. But yeah, that is it for my Tyler analysis. And with that capping off, I will leave you guys with the Thursday music that I'm looking forward to. And it's funny, as I was, finishing up my script this morning, I was looking back to see what music is going to be released, what albums are going to release this weekend, and I didn't really see anything at all. I feel like I've said that 3 times. I feel like I've said that 3 weeks in a row now, and then I've gotten music that I've loved. But it's funny because this week, as I was, typing the script up this morning, I didn't see anything, and then as the day went on, more people, said that they're going to release stuff. There's a Rico Nasty song, which I actually heard already because she released it early, which is interesting to say the least. I will talk more about that. I will definitely talk about that song later, or on Monday's podcast. There's also is it Anderson .Paak and Rick Ross? I think that's the two. They're releasing a song tonight. Interested to see what the hell that shit sounds like. And then finally, Drake teased new music dropping tonight. I am assuming it's just a single. I would assume it's just a single. It could damn well just be a whole album. I wouldn't actually be mad at that either. He did say originally that his album was going to be released in the summer, and I mean, he only has a few weeks left of summer if I'm taking him at his word. So, take that as you will. I'm just assuming that this is a single. And again, I will be the first to tell you guys if that single is ass on Monday. Excuse me. But until then, I've been Nick Hope. This has been the Bittersweet Tates podcast. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you guys on Monday.